The neon lights of Port Elysium space station flickered through the dense vapor clouds that perpetually haunted the low-gravity sectors. Dr. Mara Quinn moved through the crowded corridors with practiced ease, her steps light as she navigated past beings of all shapes and sizes. The station's central hub pulsed with activity, a strange symphony of commerce, desperation, and indifference. Mara had abandoned her prestigious position at the Interplanetary Archaeological Institute 3 standard years ago, trading academic acclaim for the uncertain freedom of independent research. She now roamed the outer reaches, searching for something that academic papers and institutional grants could never provide: meaning. Tonight, she found herself drawn to the lower levels of Port Elysium, where hydrothermal smoke mingled with neon advertising holograms in a perpetual twilight. She hadn't planned to visit this part of the station. Something had pulled her here. A whisper. A resonance that vibrated along frequencies most beings couldn't perceive. As a spiritual archaeologist, Mara had spent decades honing her sensitivity to such phenomena, though lately, she questioned whether her talents were anything more than elaborate self-deception. The ethereal pulse grew stronger as she approached a rusted door marked with symbols from at least 5 different star systems. Above them all, Universal Translation script declared, "Special merchandise, private auction." Mara hesitated. She had no interest in the black market trades that fueled Port Elysium's shadow economy. And yet, the resonance called to her, a distant melody that seemed to bypass her ears and vibrate directly within her mind. Before she could reconsider, her hand pressed against the biometric scanner beside the door. "Identity verified, Dr. Mara Quinn," announced a synthesized voice. "Auction participation approved." The door slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber. Mara's pulse quickened as she stepped inside, immediately struck by the stark contrast between the plush comfort provided for the buyers and the sterile containment units lined against the far wall. Each unit held a different being, some humanoid, others defying easy classification. All were merchandise. Mara's stomach churned. She had seen many disturbing things during her travels across the inhabited sectors, but the commodification of sentient beings still cut deep. She turned to leave, but the resonance suddenly intensified, drawing her attention to the auction block where 2 figures stood in a transparent enclosure. They were unmistakably female, though clearly not human. The taller one had skin the color of emeralds, with a subtle pattern resembling forest foliage under her translucent outer dermal layer. Her posture was rigid, defensive, eyes constantly scanning the crowd with calculating wariness. The other was smaller, with violet skin that seemed to radiate a pearl-like luminescence in the harsh auction lights. Unlike her companion, she appeared withdrawn, her gaze distant as though seeing something beyond the physical space. Final lot of the evening," announced the auctioneer, a multi-limbed being whose species Mara couldn't immediately identify. "Lot 37. Paired specimens. Classification undetermined. The green one, feral, potentially violent, but physically optimal. The purple one, defective, unresponsive, but aesthetically unique. Neither responds to standard communication protocols. Starting bid at 5,000 credits." Silence fell across the chamber. Mara looked around, noticing the disinterested expressions on the buyers' faces. Some were already standing, preparing to leave. "Any interest at 4,000 credits?" the auctioneer tried again, voice tinged with desperation. These specimens were recovered from the Vale Nebula frontier, extremely rare, possibly the last of their kind. Still no response. The auctioneer sighed. "Very well. As per protocol, unclaimed merchandise will be processed for biomaterial recycling at 10,000 credits, Mara heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. The room went still. All eyes turned toward her. "Did I hear correctly?" The auctioneer blinked all 4 of his eyes in succession. 10,000 for the paired defects? Mara stepped forward, heart hammering against her ribs. You heard correctly. Very well. The auctioneer's tone suggested he thought Mara insane. Sold to Dr. Mara Quinn for 10,000 credits. Payment processing and merchandise transfer will commence immediately. Mara stood motionless as the transaction completed. Funds transferring from her account, most of what she had left from her last archaeological consultation. As the enclosure around the two beings deactivated, security drones hovered nearby, ready to intervene if the merchandise attempted escape. The green-skinned woman's eyes, locked with Mara's, filled with a fierce intelligence and suspicion. The violet one remained distant, though Mara could have sworn she detected a slight tilt of her head, as though listening to something only she could hear. Compliance collars are already installed, the processing agent informed Mara as he handed over a control unit. Standard neural inhibitors included. Illegal removal will trigger automated enforcement protocols. Do you require transport assistance to your domicile? No, Mara replied, pocketing the control unit without looking at it. We'll manage. The agent shrugged. Merchandise transfer complete. They're your problem now. As Mara led the two women from the auction chamber, she felt the weight of their silent presence behind her. The resonance that had drawn her here was stronger now, emanating primarily from the violet-skinned woman. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like the echo of one, the memory of music that had long since faded. Mara's quarters were located in one of Port Eligium's less reputable habitation blocks, a cramped two-room apartment with minimal amenities and questionable environmental controls. She hadn't chosen it for comfort, but for its position near the station's maintenance shafts, providing multiple unmonitored exit routes if needed. As the door slid closed behind them, Mara turned to face her new companions. The green-skinned woman immediately positioned herself between Mara and the violet one, her stance protective and threatening. I'm not going to hurt either of you, Mara said, keeping her voice calm and even. My name is Mara Quinn. I'm a spiritual archaeologist, or I was. Now I'm between professions. No response. The green woman's eyes narrowed slightly. Mara sighed and reached into her pocket. The green woman tensed, but Mara slowly withdrew the control unit for their compliance collars and placed it on the table between them. I have no intention of using this, she said. I bought you because... She paused, still unsure herself of her motivations. Because I heard something from you. She looked at the violet woman. A resonance. I don't know what it means, but I know it's important. The green woman remained unmoved, but the violet one stepped forward slightly, her iridescent eyes focusing on Mara for the first time. Her lips parted, as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Instead, the resonance intensified, washing over Mara like a wave of phantom sound. You can't speak, Mara realized. Not with words, but you're communicating somehow. The violet woman nodded slowly. And you? Mara turned to the green woman. Can you speak? The woman remained still, but her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. You can understand me, though, Mara concluded. Both of you. Another subtle nod from the violet woman. The green one remained impassive, but her posture relaxed fractionally. Mara moved toward the apartment's small kitchenette. You must be hungry. I don't know what you eat, but I have some universal nutrient packs that should be compatible with most metabolisms. As she prepared the simple meal, Mara's mind raced. She had acted on impulse, draining her financial resources to purchase two beings she knew nothing about. The rational part of her brain screamed that she had made a terrible mistake. And yet, the resonance persisted, a ghostly melody that seemed to promise answers to questions she hadn't even formulated yet. I should tell you that I can't keep you here indefinitely, Mara said, as she set nutrient packs on the table. Port Eligium isn't safe for beings in your situation. We'll need to find somewhere else to go. Somewhere safer. The green woman approached the table cautiously, examining the food before allowing her companion to take any. After a moment, both began to eat, movements precise and efficient. "Do you have names?" Mara asked. The violet woman placed her hand on her chest and closed her eyes. The resonance shifted, becoming more focused, almost forming a pattern that Mara could almost recognize. "Elia," Mara said suddenly, the name appearing in her mind with unexpected clarity. "Your name is Elia." The violet woman, Elia, opened her eyes, surprise evident in her expression. She nodded, then pointed to her companion. "Soren," Mara said, though this time the name came more as an impression than a clear word. The green woman, Soren, stiffened, her gaze intensifying as she studied Mara with renewed suspicion. "I don't know how I know that," Mara admitted. "It's part of my training as a spiritual archaeologist. We learn to perceive impressions, echoes, fragments that conventional science can't measure or record." Soren's expression remained skeptical, but she made no move to contradict the identification. "Listen," Mara continued. "Those collars, they're tracking you. They're also probably designed to control you somehow. I don't know how to remove them safely, but I know someone who might. We'll need to be careful, though. The auction house will be monitoring your movements." Elia touched her collar, fingers tracing the sleek metal band encircling her throat. Her expression clouded, the resonance becoming discordant, painful. Mara winced at the psychic dissonance. "It's interfering with your communication, isn't it?" Elia nodded, her luminescent skin dimming slightly. "We'll fix it," Mara promised, though she had no idea how. "But first, we need rest. You can take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here." Neither woman moved. "It's safe," Mara assured them. "The door locks from the inside. I can't get in unless you let me." After a moment of silent communication between them, Soren led Elia toward the bedroom. At the doorway, Elia paused, turning back to Mara. The resonance shifted again, forming a pattern that felt like gratitude, though tinged with fear and uncertainty. "You're welcome," Mara replied softly. "We'll figure this out together." As the bedroom door closed, Mara collapsed onto her worn sofa, the full weight of her impulsive decision crashing down upon her. She had just spent nearly everything she had to purchase two beings who were likely escaped property, fugitives, or worse. She had no plan, few resources, and was now responsible for 3 lives instead of just her own. And yet, beneath the anxiety and doubt, something else stirred, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since leaving the Institute. The resonance that had led her to Elia and Soren wasn't random. It meant something, and Mara was determined to discover what. Morning on Portaligium was an artificial concept, the station's lighting systems gradually brightening to simulate dawn. Mara awoke to the sound of movement in her small kitchen. She opened her eyes to find Soren examining the room's environmental controls with methodical precision. "Good morning," Mara said, sitting up slowly to avoid startling her. Soren turned, acknowledging Mara with a slight nod before returning to her inspection. Her movements were fluid but deliberate, those of someone evaluating potential threats and escape routes. "Where's Elia?" Mara asked, glancing toward the closed bedroom door. In response, Soren made a series of graceful hand gestures, a formal sign language Mara didn't recognize. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," Mara admitted. Soren's expression flickered with frustration before she pointed to the bedroom and then mimicked sleeping. "Still resting? Good. She probably needs it." Mara stood and moved to the kitchenette, careful to telegraph her movements. As she prepared a simple breakfast from her dwindling supplies, she observed Soren from the corner of her eye. The green-skinned woman had an efficient, almost military bearing that suggested formal training. The way she positioned herself, always maintaining sight lines to both the bedroom and the apartment's exits, spoke of someone accustomed to protective duty. You're her guardian, Mara realized aloud. Soren paused, then gave a single, affirmative nod. Were you always her guardian? Or did that become your role later? Soren's eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating Mara's question for hidden threats. After a moment, she held up two fingers. The second option, you became her guardian later. Another nod. Before Mara could ask more, the bedroom door slid open. Aaliyah emerged, her violet skin pulsing with subtle luminescence that shifted with her movements. She looked more rested, though the compliance collar still disrupted the resonance that emanated from her. Good morning, Aaliyah, Mara said gently. I've made some breakfast. It's not much, but it should help restore your energy. Aaliyah approached, her movements more fluid than Soren's, almost dance-like in their grace. She accepted the nutrient pack Mara offered, her fingers briefly brushing against Mara's. At the contact, the resonance flared, and Mara caught a fleeting impression of cascading musical notes. You were a sound artist, Mara gasped, the realization striking her with unexpected clarity. Aaliyah's eyes widened, and she nodded emphatically, the resonance around her strengthening despite the caller's interference. That's what I'm hearing from you. Music. Not just any music, but your music. Compositions. Creations. Mara turned to Soren. And you're a warrior of some kind. A protector. Soren inclined her head in confirmation, studying Mara with renewed interest. I still don't understand how you two came to be together, or how you ended up at that auction, Mara said. But I think I might know someone who can help with those collars. Someone who owes me a favor. Mara activated her portable terminal, sending a carefully coded message to an old contact, a technician named Kale, who specialized in repurposing restricted technology. Kale had ethical boundaries that most Port Eligium residents lacked, making them one of the few people Mara felt she could trust, at least conditionally. While waiting for a response, Mara focused on making her guests more comfortable. She adjusted the apartment's environmental settings, fine-tuning the atmospheric pressure, humidity, and light spectrum based on subtle cues from Aaliyah and Soren's reactions. As a spiritual archaeologist, Mara had learned that physical comfort often facilitated psychic connection, a principle that applied to all sentient beings, regardless of origin. I believe your species evolved in environments with different atmospheric conditions, Mara observed as she lowered the room's artificial gravity by 15%. This might feel more natural. The effect was immediate. Both women seemed to relax visibly, their movements becoming more fluid and natural. Elia's luminescence brightened, and the resonance around her clarified slightly. I wish I could understand you better, Mara said to Elia. Your resonance is beautiful, but I'm only catching fragments. Elia looked thoughtful, then gestured to Mara's terminal. With hesitant movements, she pantomimed drawing or writing. You want to write? Mara activated the terminal's drawing function and handed it to Elia. Here, try this. Elia's fingers moved across the surface with delicate precision. Rather than words or conventional symbols, she created a flowing pattern of intersecting lines and spirals, a visual representation of sound waves. As she worked, the resonance around her synchronized with the emerging pattern. Mara watched in fascination as the abstract design took shape. It's a translation, she realized. You're showing me how to interpret your resonance visually. Elia nodded encouragingly, adding more detail to the pattern. Beside her, Soren watched with protective attention, occasionally making subtle adjustments to Elia's work with her own precise gestures. A soft chime from Mara's communication system interrupted their progress. Kale had responded, brief and cautious, but agreeing to meet in a maintenance access junction far from the station's surveillance systems. We have a meeting, Mara informed her companions, showing them the message. But we'll need to move carefully. Those callers are being tracked. Soren made a sharp, dismissive gesture, then pointed to the environmental controls Mara had adjusted earlier. The electromagnetic field from the gravity modulators. Mara understood immediately. It might disrupt the tracking signal, at least temporarily. Soren nodded, her expression conveying grudging approval of Mara's insight. We'll need to stay within the maintenance corridors where similar fields are present, Mara continued, pulling up a schematic of Port Elysium on her terminal. If we follow this route through the reactor service tunnels, we should be able to reach the meeting point without being detected. Aaliyah studied the map, her fingers tracing particular junctions. The resonance shifted, conveying something Mara couldn't quite grasp. What is it? Mara asked. Do you see a problem with this route? Aaliyah pointed to several sections of the map in sequence, then gestured toward her ears and shook her head. Those areas have sonic monitoring, Mara guessed. Acoustic surveillance. Aaliyah nodded vigorously. How would you know that? Mara wondered aloud, then answered her own question. Because you can perceive sound patterns that others can't. Of course. Mara adjusted their route, plotting a course that would avoid the areas Aaliyah had identified. As she worked, a realization struck her. They were already functioning as a team, each contributing unique perceptions and skills. It had been years since Mara had collaborated with anyone this seamlessly. Not since she'd abandoned her research team during the Cygnus incident. The memory brought a familiar stab of guilt. She pushed it aside, focusing on the present challenge. We'll leave in 30 minutes, she told the others. Pack only what you need. We may not be coming back here. As Aaliyah and Soren prepared, Mara received another message. This one, on an encrypted channel she rarely used. The sender was untraceable, but the content sent ice through her veins. Merchandise recovery notice. 2 unregistered specimens, auction lot number 37, have been reported missing. The Requital Corps has been authorized to retrieve this property. All station residents are advised to report sightings to station security. Substantial reward offered. Attached was a grainy image captured from the auction chamber, showing Aaliyah and Soren in their containment unit. A second image showed Mara leading them from the auction house. We need to leave now, Mara announced, showing them the message. The Requital Corps has been activated. Soren's expression darkened at the mention of the Corps. She made a violent slashing gesture across her throat. Yes, they're extremely dangerous, Mara agreed. They're mercenaries who specialize in merchandise recovery, bounty hunters with official sanction, and military-grade equipment. Aaliyah's luminescence dimmed with fear, the resonance around her becoming erratic. Soren moved to her side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. The gesture seemed to stabilize the resonance slightly. We still have the advantage of local knowledge, Mara assured them, as she gathered her few essential belongings. I've spent years mapping Port Elysium's hidden passages. The Corps may have technology and weapons, but they don't know this station like I do. They left the apartment through a maintenance panel Mara had modified months ago, emerging into a narrow service corridor bathed in the dull red glow of emergency lighting. The air was thick with the scent of lubricant and ozone, the distant hum of the station's massive reactors vibrating through the metal flooring. Stay close, Mara whispered. The gravity fields are strongest near the power conduits. It should help mask the caller signals. They moved in silence, Mara leading, Soren guarding their rear. Aaliyah remained between them, her luminescent skin providing just enough light to navigate the darkest sections of the corridor. Whenever they approached an intersection, Aaliyah would pause, her head tilting slightly, as she perceived acoustic patterns invisible to ordinary senses. A subtle gesture from her would guide them away from dangerous routes. After 20 minutes of tense navigation, they reached the junction where Kale had agreed to meet them. The space was cramped, a nexus of ventilation shafts and power conduits that formed a small chamber, well shielded from station surveillance. Kale should be here soon, Mara said, checking the time. They're very precise. As if summoned by her words, a section of wall panel slid aside, revealing a slight figure wearing maintenance coveralls and a mask that concealed their features. "Quinn," Kale's voice was electronically distorted. "I see your talent for finding trouble remains undiminished. And your talent for profit opportunities remains equally sharp," Mara replied. "I'm calling in that favor you owe me." Kale's masked face turned toward Elia and Soren. "Requital Corps is tearing apart the lower levels looking for these two. The bounty has tripled in the last hour." "Can you remove the collars or not?" Mara asked impatiently. "Of course I can," Kale replied, producing a slender tool from their belt. "But I need to know what I'm dealing with. These aren't standard compliance models." Soren stepped forward, tilting her head to expose her collar. Kale approached cautiously, scanning the device with a handheld analyzer. "Interesting," they murmured. "This isn't commercial tech. It's military grade, neural dampening with integrated tracking. Someone went to a lot of expense and trouble." "Can you remove it without harming her?" Mara pressed. "Yes, but it will trigger a proximity alert the moment it's deactivated. They'll know exactly where we are." Kale turned to examine Elia's collar. "This one's different. Same basic technology, but modified. It's specifically targeting certain neural pathways, the ones associated with vocalization and sound production." Elia's eyes widened, and the resonance around her intensified, becoming almost painful in its discord. They deliberately silenced her, Mara realized, anger rising within her. They knew about her abilities and specifically designed a collar to neutralize them. "Who are they?" Kale asked, continuing their examination of the collars. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." Mara turned to Elia and Soren. "We need to make a decision. If Kale removes these collars, the Requital Corps will know our location immediately. We'll need to move fast. Get off this station before they can lock it down." Soren and Elia exchanged a look, communicating in their silent language. After a moment, both nodded decisively. "Do it," Mara told Kale. "But first, we need an escape plan." Kale activated a holographic display showing Port Elysium's docking bays. "Bay 17 has a merchant vessel preparing for departure, the Astra Nomad. Captain owes me for some custom modifications. They're scheduled to leave in 40 minutes, bound for the Rifter's Sanctuary." "Rifter's Sanctuary," Mara repeated, hope rising within her. "That's perfect. I did research there years ago. It's a refuge planet, outside corporate jurisdiction. If you can reach Bay 17 in 30 minutes, I can arrange passage." Kale continued. "But once these collars come off, you'll have the core on your tail immediately." "We'll take that route through the reactor core," Mara decided, pointing to a hazardous maintenance path on the station schematic. "The radiation will scramble their tracking systems." "That's a restricted area for a reason, Quinn," Kale warned. "The radiation levels are within tolerable limits for short exposure," Mara finished. "I've used that route before." Kale shrugged. "Your funeral." They turned to Soren, raising their deactivation tool. "This will hurt. Ready?" Soren nodded stoically. Kale pressed the tool against the collar's seam, and a high-pitched whine filled the chamber. Soren's body went rigid, but she made no sound as the collar clicked open and fell away, revealing a band of darkened skin beneath. Immediately, Kale moved to Elia, repeating the process. When her collar released, Elia gasped, the first vocalization Mara had heard from her. The sound was like crystal chimes, musical even in its brevity. "The Corps will have your location in about 3 minutes," Kale said, gathering their tools. "I've programmed the Astra Nomad's docking bay into your terminal. Remember, 30 minutes or you miss your window." "Thank you, Kale," Mara said sincerely. "This pays our debt in full." "And then some," Kale replied dryly. "Now go. And Quinn, try not to die. The galaxy is more interesting with you in it." With that, Kale disappeared back through the hidden panel, leaving the 3 fugitives alone in the junction chamber. "Can either of you speak now?" Mara asked quickly. Soren shook her head, pointing to her throat and making a slashing gesture. Aaliyah opened her mouth, emitting a series of musical tones that fluctuated in pitch and intensity. The resonance around her synchronized with the sounds, creating a complex harmonic pattern that Mara could almost comprehend. Not words, Mara realized, but something more fundamental. Sound is a direct expression of thought. A distant alarm began to wail, echoing through the service corridors. "They've detected the collar deactivation," Mara said grimly. "We need to move, now." They plunged into the labyrinth of maintenance tunnels, moving as quickly as silence would allow. The station's emergency systems had activated in response to the security alert, periodically plunging sections of the corridor into darkness as power was rerouted to priority systems. Aaliyah's bioluminescence proved invaluable in these moments, providing just enough light to navigate. Soren moved with lethal efficiency, her newly liberated body demonstrating combat training that the collar had partially suppressed. When automated security drones appeared in their path, she dispatched them with precise strikes that disabled without triggering further alarms. As they approached the reactor service area, radiation warning symbols glowed ominously on the bulkheads. Mara paused, removing 3 injection ampules from her pack. "Radiation countermeasures," she explained, offering them to her companions. "They'll protect us for about 15 minutes. After that, we need to be clear of this section." Soren examined the ampule suspiciously before administering it to herself with practiced ease. She then took the second ampule and gently applied it to Elia's neck, her touch surprisingly tender for one so clearly trained in combat. "The reactor core is through that chamber," Mara said, pointing to a heavy, shielded door ahead. "Once we're inside, the radiation will mask our biosignatures. But we'll need to move quickly, not just because of the radiation, but because this will be the first place the core looks once they realize they've lost our trail." The reactor chamber was massive, a cathedral of technology built around the station's fusion core. Blue-white energy pulsed within the containment field, casting stark shadows across catwalks and maintenance platforms. The air shimmered with heat and radiation, creating a mirage-like distortion that made distance difficult to judge. "Stay on the marked pathway," Mara instructed, pointing to yellow hazard lines painted on the metal flooring. "The radiation is lowest there." They had crossed perhaps half the chamber when Aaliyah suddenly froze, her head tilting in that now familiar listening posture. She emitted a series of urgent musical tones, gesturing frantically toward an upper catwalk. Mara looked up and saw them, 6 figures in the distinctive armor of the Requital Corps, their features hidden behind environmental masks. They moved with military precision, taking positions that would cut off any retreat. "They've found us," Mara whispered unnecessarily. "We need to reach that exit on the far side. It's our only chance." Soren assessed the situation with a tactical eye, then made a series of quick hand gestures to Ilya. The violet woman nodded in understanding, her luminescence intensifying as she drew a deep breath. "What are you?" Mara began, but her words were drowned out by what happened next. Ilya released a sound unlike anything Mara had ever heard, a cascading harmonic that seemed to exist simultaneously at multiple frequencies. The sound wasn't loud, yet it filled the chamber completely, interacting with the reactor's electromagnetic field in ways that defied conventional physics. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The core members clutched at their helmets, their coordinated movements dissolving into chaos as their communication systems overloaded. Several of their weapons discharged randomly, energy bolts sizzling into the chamber walls. "Now!" Soren gestured urgently, pushing Mara toward the exit as she protectively flanked Ilya, who maintained the disruptive harmonic with visible effort. They ran, no longer concerned with stealth, racing across the remaining expanse of the reactor chamber as the core struggled to regroup above them. Just as they reached the exit, a voice amplified by external speakers boomed across the chamber. "Dr. Mara Quinn, you are in violation of corporate property statutes. Surrender the specimens immediately or face lethal authorization. Mara didn't slow, ushering Elia and Soren through the exit before following herself. The heavy door sealed behind them, temporarily blocking pursuit. "They know who I am," Mara gasped as they continued running. "That complicates things." Soren shot her a look that clearly communicated, "Everything about this is already complicated." They emerged from the maintenance corridors into a busier section of the station, where cargo was being prepared for transport. Bay 17 was visible ahead, the sleek form of the Astra Nomad positioned for departure. Station workers moved around them, too focused on their tasks to pay attention to 3 more bodies in the constant flow of port traffic. "We're almost there," Mara encouraged, checking the time. "Kale should have informed the captain. We just need to board without drawing attention." As they approached the ship, a figure detached from the shadows near the boarding ramp. A humanoid with metallic scales instead of skin. Eyes that glowed with cybernetic enhancement. "Dr. Quinn," the figure said quietly. "Captain says you have passage. Hurry. Corps just put the station on lockdown. We have special clearance to depart. But it won't last." They boarded quickly, the ramp retracting behind them as the ship's engines began their startup sequence. The crew member led them to a small cargo hold, converted into makeshift quarters. "Stay here until we clear Port Elysium space," they instructed. "Captain will speak with you then." Left alone, the 3 fugitives collapsed onto storage crates, the adrenaline of their escape beginning to fade. Elia looked particularly drained, her luminescence dimmed to a faint glow. The harmonic display in the reactor chamber had clearly taxed her severely. "That was incredible," Mara said to her. "What you did back there. I've never seen anything like it." Elia smiled weakly, emitting a soft, grateful tone. Soren moved to her side, supporting her with an arm around her shoulders. "You two have been through so much," Mara said softly. "And I still don't understand how you ended up at that auction, or why the Corps is so determined to reclaim you." Soren's expression darkened. She pointed to Elia, then to her own temple, then made a series of gestures that suggested communication or broadcast. "Her abilities," Mara interpreted. "Someone wants her abilities." Soren nodded, then pointed to herself and mimicked a protective stance. "And you were assigned to protect her, or you chose to?" Soren held up 2 fingers again, the second option. "You chose to protect her," Mara repeated. "Because—" Elia interrupted with a gentle musical phrase, placing her hand over Soren's. The resonance between them shifted, forming a pattern Mara recognized instantly. The universal frequency of deep connection, of love. "Oh," Mara said, understanding blooming. "You're not just her protector. You're her partner." Both women nodded, their fingers intertwining. The ship lurched slightly as it detached from the docking clamps. Moments later, the distinctive sensation of artificial gravity adjusting indicated they were clear of the station and accelerating to jump velocity. "We made it," Mara breathed, relief washing over her. "For now, at least." A communications panel near the door activated. "Dr. Quinn," came a gravelly voice. "Captain Lissa here. We're clear of Port Elysium and preparing for the jump to Rifter's Sanctuary. Kale told me you might have some trouble on your tail. Care to elaborate?" Mara approached the panel. "It's complicated, Captain. The short version is that my companions were being held against their will. I helped them escape. The Requital Corps wants them back." A low whistle came through the speaker. "The Corps doesn't give up easily. What's so special about your friends that warrants that kind of heat?" Mara glanced at Elia and Soren, considering how much to reveal. "They have unique abilities. Abilities someone wants to control and exploit." "I see." Captain Lissa's tone suggested she understood more than Mara had explicitly stated. "Well, Rifter's Sanctuary is beyond corporate jurisdiction. You should be safe there, at least temporarily. We'll arrive in approximately 47 hours. My crew will provide food and necessities. I suggest you rest while you can. Thank you, Captain, Mara replied sincerely. We're grateful for your help. Don't thank me yet, Lysa said dryly. Kale called in a significant favor. I expect I'll be compensated accordingly when we reach our destination. The communication ended abruptly, leaving the three alone again in the cargo hold. You should both rest, Mara told her companions. Especially you, Elia. What you did in the reactor chamber clearly takes a toll. Elia nodded tiredly, allowing Soren to guide her to a makeshift sleeping area the crew had prepared. As they settled, Mara took the opportunity to examine the collars they had discarded. The technology was indeed advanced, neural inhibitors designed to target specific brain functions while leaving others intact. Elia's collar contained additional components focused on the speech centers and auditory processing regions of the brain. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to silence her, to prevent her from using her natural abilities. But why? What made her sound manipulation so valuable or so dangerous? And Soren, her collar had suppressed motor functions and combat reflexes while leaving her general mobility intact. She had been deliberately handicapped, but not incapacitated, transformed from warrior to merchandise. Mara set the collars aside, troubled by their implications. As she did, she noticed Elia watching her, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion but still alert. We'll figure this out, Mara promised her. I won't let them take either of you again. Elia responded with a gentle musical phrase, different from her earlier communications. Simpler, but somehow more profound. The resonance it created seemed to touch something deep within Mara's consciousness, evoking a sense of gratitude and trust that transcended language. Mara smiled, feeling the weight of her impulsive decision at the auction house transform into something else, a sense of purpose, of rightness. Whatever dangers lay ahead, she knew with certainty that she had made the correct choice. As Elia finally succumbed to sleep, nestled protectively against Soren, Mara turned her attention to planning their next steps. Rifter's sanctuary offered temporary safety, but the Corps would eventually track them there. They needed more than refuge. They needed answers, allies, and a way to ensure Elia and Soren's permanent freedom. For the first time in years, Mara found herself thinking like the scientist she had once been. Methodical, strategic, focused on solutions rather than escape. The spiritual archaeologist was awakening from a long dormancy, driven by mysteries that demanded resolution. The journey to Rifter's sanctuary passed more peacefully than Mara had dared hope. Captain Lysa proved to be a woman of discretion, asking few questions and keeping her crew away from the cargo hold, where the three fugitives had established their temporary quarters. Food and basic necessities were delivered at regular intervals, allowing them to recover from the ordeal of their escape. During this relative calm, Mara began working with Elia to develop a more efficient communication system. The Violet Woman's natural mode of expression, pure sound untethered from conventional language, was beautiful, but often difficult for Mara to interpret precisely. Using her terminal's visual interface, they created a translation matrix that mapped Elia's musical patterns to standard linguistic concepts. Progress was slow, but rewarding. By the second day of their journey, Mara could understand perhaps 60% of Elia's sonic communications, and Elia had developed a simplified harmonic range that Mara found easier to comprehend. Soren participated in these sessions with protective vigilance, her tactical mindset never fully at ease despite their temporary safety. She continued to communicate through a combination of hand gestures and physical expressions, refusing Mara's offers to establish a more formal sign language system. "You don't trust easily, do you?" Mara observed during one such session. Soren's expression remained impassive, but her eyes flickered briefly to Elia before returning to Mara with unmistakable meaning. "I trust where I must, and no further." "Fair enough," Mara acknowledged. "Trust has to be earned. I hope I'm making progress in that department." A barely perceptible nod was Soren's only response. As they worked together, fragments of their past emerged through Aaliyah's sonic narratives, translated imperfectly through Mara's growing understanding of her unique language. Aaliyah had indeed been a sound artist on her homeworld, creating compositions that influenced emotional states and even physical reality through precisely calibrated harmonics. Her abilities had made her celebrated among her people, but also attracted unwanted attention from off-world interests. Soren had been a frontier warrior, part of a defensive force protecting outlying settlements. She had been assigned to guard a diplomatic envoy visiting Aaliyah's world, a routine mission that changed dramatically when mercenary forces attacked, specifically targeting Aaliyah and others with similar abilities. The attack had decimated Aaliyah's community. In the chaos of evacuation, Soren had chosen to remain with Aaliyah rather than return to her unit, becoming her protector and eventually her partner as they fled from system to system, always one step ahead of their pursuers. Until Port Elysium, where they had finally been captured, their abilities suppressed, and their very personhood reduced to merchandise for the highest bidder. But no one bid, Mara mused as Aaliyah's musical account faded. No one except me. Why? If your abilities are valuable enough to warrant this kind of pursuit, why didn't anyone recognize that at the auction? Aaliyah's response came as a complex harmonic that the translation matrix interpreted approximately. Collars hiding truth, appearing broken, defective. Purpose. They deliberately made you seem defective, Mara realized. The collars weren't just suppressing your abilities. They were making you appear damaged, worthless. But why go to all that trouble only to let you be sold to someone like me? Soren made a sharp gesture, drawing their attention. She pointed to herself and Aaliyah, then mimed being watched, followed by a gesture toward Mara. You think they let you be sold to see who would buy you? Mara translated. That I was the target all along? Soren shrugged, but her expression suggested she considered it a strong possibility. But that doesn't make sense, Mara objected. I'm nobody important. I left the Institute years ago. My research is largely forgotten. Aaliyah emitted a questioning melody that the Matrix translated as, What research? What seeking? Mara hesitated. She rarely discussed her past work, especially the project that had led to her self-imposed exile from the academic community. But Aaliyah and Soren had shared their story. Perhaps it was time to reciprocate. I specialized in xenoharmonics, the study of how different species perceive and utilize sound as a fundamental force, rather than just a communication medium. Most established sciences treat sound as a purely physical phenomenon, pressure waves moving through matter, but my research suggested something more complex. Aaliyah leaned forward, her luminescence brightening with interest. I discovered evidence that certain species, particularly ancient ones, developed the ability to manipulate reality through precisely calibrated sonic frequencies. Not technology, but an evolved biological ability. I called it resonant manipulation, using sound to directly influence energy states at the quantum level. Aaliyah's response came as an excited cascade of harmonics, too complex for the matrix to translate fully. But her meaning was clear. Yes, exactly. You can do this, Mara breathed, the implications striking her with full force. What you did in the reactor chamber, that wasn't just disrupting communications or creating confusion. You were actually manipulating the electromagnetic field at a fundamental level. Aaliyah nodded emphatically, her luminescence pulsing in patterns that matched her sonic emissions. My research was considered fringe science at best, pseudoscience at worst, Mara continued. The Institute tolerated it because of my previous contributions, but few took it seriously. Until the Cygnus incident. Both Aaliyah and Soren grew still, sensing the weight this memory carried for Mara. We discovered an ancient structure on Cygnus 4, a temple or observatory of some kind. The architecture was built around acoustic principles, unlike anything we'd encountered. When we activated certain sequences, Mara paused, the memory still painful after all these years. Something happened, a resonance cascade that spiraled out of control. 3 of my colleagues were caught in it. Their neural patterns were altered, permanently. Mara looked down at her hands, which had begun to tremble slightly. I escaped unharmed, but I couldn't explain why. The Institute launched an investigation. They concluded that my research had been reckless, that I had ignored safety protocols. My career was effectively over. She looked up, meeting Aaliyah's luminescent gaze. But the truth was more complicated. I didn't just escape unharmed. I experienced something during that cascade, a connection to a level of reality I couldn't explain or document scientifically. That's when I left conventional archaeology and began pursuing spiritual archaeology instead, seeking to understand the consciousness behind the structures rather than just their physical properties. Aaliyah's response was gentle, a soothing melody that conveyed understanding without judgment. Soren, too, seemed to soften slightly, her protective stance relaxing infinitesimally. And now I find you, a living embodiment of everything my research suggested was possible. Mara concluded. It can't be coincidence. Something led me to that auction house, to you specifically. Before either could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Dr. Quinn, came Captain Lissa's voice. We're approaching Rifter's sanctuary. Arrival in approximately 1 hour. You and your companions should prepare for disembarkation. Thank you, Captain, Mara replied. We'll be ready. As the communication ended, Mara turned back to her companions. Rifter's sanctuary is a unique place, technically a colony world, but it operates under its own governance, outside corporate jurisdiction. It began as a scientific outpost studying the rifts, quantum anomalies that appear throughout the planet's atmosphere. Over time, it became a haven for researchers, artists, and others seeking freedom from corporate oversight. Aaliyah's response translated roughly as, Safety there, duration? Safer than most places, Mara answered honestly. But I won't pretend it's permanent. The Corps has no official authority there, but that doesn't mean they won't find ways to operate covertly. Still, it gives us time to plan our next steps. Soren made a series of quick gestures, her expression serious. You're right, Mara agreed, understanding the gist of her concern. We need to know who's behind this, why they want Aaliyah specifically. Without that information, we'll always be running. Aaliyah's musical response was resolute, a determined sequence that needed no translation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Rifter's sanctuary emerged from the darkness of space, like a jewel set against the void. A blue-green world, wrapped in shifting veils of iridescent energy. The rifts were visible even from orbit, shimmering tears in the fabric of reality that rippled across the planet's atmosphere, in unpredictable patterns. The astronomad descended through these ethereal disturbances with practiced precision, its navigation systems compensating for the quantum fluctuations that made approaching the planet challenging for less experienced pilots. As they broke through the lower atmosphere, the landscape below came into focus, a terrain of dramatic contrasts, where dense forests and crystalline lakes gave way to bizarre geological formations, shaped by centuries of exposure to the rift's reality-altering energies. Preparing for landing at New Haven, announced Captain Lissa over the ship's communication system. All passengers secure for descent. The ship settled onto a landing pad on the outskirts of the colony's main settlement, a sprawling arrangement of structures that blended harmoniously with the surrounding landscape rather than imposing upon it. Unlike the harsh industrial architecture of Port Elysium, New Haven had been built with aesthetics and environmental integration as priorities. As promised, Captain Lissa arranged for their discreet transfer from the ship to the settlement, providing them with temporary identification codes that would grant access to basic services without triggering external verification systems that might alert the Corps to their presence. "This gets us even," the captain told Mara as they prepared to depart. "Whatever you and your friends are involved in, I want no further part in it. Understood?" "Completely," Mara assured her. "Thank you for your help, Captain. It won't be forgotten." Lyssa's expression softened slightly. "Good luck, Dr. Quinn. You seem like someone who's trying to do the right thing. That's rare enough these days to merit some respect." With that parting sentiment, they were escorted from the ship and into New Haven proper. The settlement bustled with activity, despite its relatively small population. Researchers, artists, and free traders moved through streets lined with structures that incorporated living materials alongside traditional building components, a physical manifestation of the colony's philosophy of harmonious coexistence. Mara led her companions toward a modest dwelling on the settlement's eastern edge, a single-story structure partially embedded in a hillside, with a living roof of native vegetation that helped it blend into the surrounding landscape. "I maintained a residence here during my research expeditions," Mara explained as they approached. "It's been years since I last visited, but the property remains in my name." She pressed her palm against the entrance scanner, relieved when it illuminated with recognition and the door slid open. The interior was simple but comfortable. A main living area, 2 small bedrooms, a functional kitchen, and a workspace filled with equipment related to Mara's research. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, but otherwise intact. "It's not luxurious," Mara said apologetically, "but it's secure. The entire structure is shielded against standard scanning technologies, a necessity when working with sensitive artifacts. It should keep us hidden, at least temporarily." Aaliyah moved through the space with obvious curiosity, her fingers trailing over Mara's collection of research instruments. Many were designed for acoustic analysis, precisely the tools that would help better understand her abilities. Her luminescence brightened with excitement as she recognized their purpose. Soren, predictably, focused on security, examining entry points, sightlines, and defensive possibilities with professional assessment. Her expression remained neutral, but Mara sensed a cautious approval of the dwelling's defensible position. "We should be safe here for now," Mara said, activating the environmental systems to clear the stale air. "But we need to establish some protections immediately. Soren, could you help me set up perimeter alerts?" The green-skinned warrior nodded, following Mara to a storage compartment containing security equipment. Together, they established a network of subtle warning systems that would alert them to any unusual approach to the dwelling. Meanwhile, Aaliyah explored Mara's acoustic laboratory, her musical communications expressing wonder and recognition as she examined instruments designed to measure and analyze precisely the phenomena she could generate naturally. When Mara and Soren returned, they found her seated at the central console, already intuitively navigating the interface. "You understand the equipment," Mara observed with surprise. Aaliyah's response translated approximately. "Same principles, different application. Your technology measures what my people create." "This is perfect," Mara realized. "With these instruments, we can document and analyze your abilities scientifically. If we understand exactly how your sonic manipulation works, we might be able to develop countermeasures against anyone trying to exploit it." Over the following days, a routine emerged. Mornings were dedicated to experiments in the acoustic laboratory, with Aaliyah demonstrating her abilities, while Mara's instruments recorded and analyzed the results. Soren maintained security, establishing patrol routes around the property and identifying potential escape routes should they become necessary. Afternoons were spent improving their communication systems. The translation matrix grew more sophisticated as Mara's understanding of Aaliyah's sonic language deepened. Soren gradually adopted a more standardized set of gestural signals, though she remained reluctant to fully embrace any formal system that might restrict her tactical flexibility. Evenings were for planning and, increasingly, for connection. As the days passed, the three fugitives found themselves sharing more than just information and skills. Meals became opportunities for cultural exchange, with Mara learning about Aaliyah and Soren's respective homeworlds while sharing stories of her own experiences across the inhabited sectors. A bond was forming between them, tentative at first, especially with the still-guarded Soren, but strengthening with each passing day. They were no longer just allies of convenience, but companions united by a common purpose and growing mutual respect. On the seventh day after their arrival, a breakthrough occurred. During a standard experimental session, Aaliyah produced a harmonic sequence that interacted with one of Mara's older instruments, a quantum resonance detector she had designed during her institute days. The device, which had been dormant for years, suddenly activated, its display filling with patterns that matched the rifts visible in Rifter's sanctuary's atmosphere. "Incredible," Mara breathed, studying the correlations. "Your harmonics are operating at the same frequency range as the rifts. You're actually manipulating quantum fields directly." Aaliyah's response was excited, but unsurprised. This was knowledge her people had possessed intuitively for generations, though they conceptualized it through cultural and artistic frameworks rather than scientific ones. "This explains why someone would go to such lengths to capture you," Mara continued, the implications unfolding rapidly in her mind. "With abilities like yours, properly harnessed, one could potentially create controlled quantum disturbances, rifts that could be used for energy production, faster than light communication, maybe even weapons." Soren, who had been observing from the doorway, made a sharp gesture of agreement. She had suspected as much from the beginning, that Elia's value lay not in her artistic gifts, but in their potential military applications. Elia's luminescence dimmed with distress, her musical response somber and troubled. The translation matrix interpreted, "Creation became destruction, sound to heal, not harm." "Of course," Mara assured her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's why we're going to protect you, to ensure your abilities remain yours to use as you choose, not as weapons for someone else's agenda." The moment of connection was interrupted by a soft chime from the perimeter alert system. Someone was approaching the dwelling, a single individual, moving openly along the main path, rather than attempting stealth. Soren immediately shifted to combat readiness, positioning herself between the potential threat and her companions. Mara accessed the external cameras, displaying the visitor on the main console. "It's Kale," she said with surprise, recognizing the technician from Port Elysium, despite the different attire. "How did they find us?" Soren's expression darkened with suspicion, her hands forming gestures that clearly communicated trap, betrayal. "Possibly," Mara agreed. "But Kale helped us escape. Why follow us just to betray us now?" After a brief discussion, they decided to allow Kale to approach, but prepared for potential deception. Soren positioned herself out of sight near the entrance, ready to intervene if necessary. Elia remained in the laboratory, where her abilities would be most effective if needed. Mara opened the door just as Kale reached the threshold. The technician looked different from their last meeting, more disheveled, tense, their cybernetic enhancements glitching slightly from what appeared to be hasty repairs. "You need to leave," Kale said without preamble. "Immediately. The Corps found me 3 days ago. They persuaded me to reveal what I knew about your destination." "You betrayed us," Mara stated flatly. "Not willingly," Kale replied, displaying a nasty burn mark along their forearm. "And not completely. I told them you were headed to Rifter's sanctuary, but not about your property here. Still, they're systematic. They'll find you eventually." "Why warn us?" Mara asked, still suspicious. "Why not just let them find us?" "Because I saw what they did to the last person who helped you. the cargo handler from the Astra Nomad. It wasn't pretty. Kale glanced nervously over their shoulder. And because this is bigger than you realize, the core is just the visible front. They're working for someone else, someone with serious resources and influence. Who? Mara demanded. I don't know names, but I recognize the technology in those collars. It's Helix Consortium Black Research, the kind of stuff that doesn't officially exist. Kale produced a small data crystal from their pocket. This contains everything I could gather about their operation before I had to run. Tracking protocols, communication frequencies, command structure. It might help you stay ahead of them. Mara accepted the crystal cautiously. Why help us now, at such risk to yourself? Kale's expression hardened. Because I've seen what happens when entities like Helix go unchallenged. They take and take until nothing remains. And because... They gestured toward the laboratory where Elia waited. Her abilities. I analyzed the caller's suppression patterns. If what I suspect is true, she represents something extraordinary. Something that shouldn't be weaponized. Before Mara could respond, the perimeter alert chimed again. Multiple contacts this time, approaching rapidly from multiple directions. They followed me, Kale realized with horror. I must have missed a tracker. I'm sorry, I thought I was clean. Back exit, Mara decided instantly. Soren, get Aaliyah. Essential equipment only. As Soren retrieved Aaliyah from the laboratory, Mara quickly gathered critical research data and the few instruments small enough to transport. Kale joined the hurried preparations, clearly intending to flee with them. There's a research outpost near the southern rift, Kale informed them as they worked. Minimal staff, good security, off most official records. We might find temporary shelter there. How far? Mara asked, slinging a pack over her shoulder. 20 kilometers through difficult terrain. The rifts interfere with most transportation systems in that sector. We'll need to go on foot. Aaliyah and Soren emerged from the laboratory, carrying portable versions of the most critical acoustic analysis equipment. Aaliyah's expression was resolute, her luminescence steady despite the danger. Soren moved with combat-ready precision, her body language communicating readiness for whatever came next. They slipped out through a concealed exit in the hillside behind the dwelling, emerging into dense forest, just as the first core operatives became visible, approaching the main entrance. Moving quickly, but quietly, the four fugitives disappeared into the wilderness, guided by Mara's knowledge of the local terrain and Kale's coordinates for their destination. The landscape of Rifter's sanctuary grew increasingly strange as they progressed southward. Normal forests gave way to groves of crystalline vegetation that chimed softly in the breeze. Conventional geology transformed into impossible formations, rock structures that seemed to phase in and out of solid state. Waterfalls that flowed upward before cascading down again in defiance of gravity. The rifts are stronger here, Mara explained, as they navigated these anomalies. Reality becomes more negotiable. For Aaliyah, this environment seemed to amplify her abilities. Her luminescence brightened, and the resonance around her synchronized with the ambient quantum fluctuations, creating harmonics that made navigation easier for the group. She could sense stable paths through otherwise treacherous terrain, guiding them with musical signals that grew increasingly precise as she adapted to the unique conditions. Soren remained vigilant, constantly scanning for pursuit. The core would have tracking technology designed to function even in these unusual conditions, and their training would make them formidable in any environment. As night fell, the rifts became visible as shimmering veils of energy that rippled across the sky, casting an eerie, multicolored light over the landscape. They made camp in a relatively stable pocket between two minor anomalies, using the natural quantum interference to help mask their presence from conventional scanning. We should reach the outpost by midday tomorrow, Kale informed them as they shared a meager meal of emergency rations. Assuming the terrain remains navigable. And assuming the outpost is as secure as you believe, Mara added, still not entirely trusting Kale's information after their inadvertent betrayal. "It's our best option," Kale insisted. "The head researcher there owes me for some specialized equipment modifications. They'll provide shelter, at least temporarily." As the others prepared for rest, Aaliyah wandered to the edge of their small camp, gazing up at the rippling quantum energies above. Mara joined her, sensing her need for connection. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. Aaliyah's response came as a gentle melodic sequence that the portable translator Mara carried interpreted as familiar, different but similar. The rifts sing like my people's sacred places. Your homeworld had quantum anomalies too? Ancient sites, places where reality thins, where sound shapes existence. Aaliyah's musical communication grew more complex, stretching the translator's capabilities. My ancestors built amplification chambers, healing centers where harmonics restored balance to body and mind. That's what you were training to do, Mara realized. Before you were forced to flee? Aaliyah nodded, her luminescence pulsing with remembered purpose. Healing through resonance, now used for weapons, for control. Her expression darkened, the musical pattern shifting to minor keys of sorrow and determination. Must reclaim, must protect the knowledge. We will, Mara promised. Together. From the edge of the camp, Soren watched their interaction with an unreadable expression. Though still reserved, her attitude toward Mara had evolved from suspicion to a guarded respect. She recognized in the archaeologist a genuine commitment to protecting Aaliyah, and perhaps something more, a growing personal investment that mirrored, in some small way, her own devotion. The night passed without incident, though none of them slept deeply, alert to the possibility of pursuit. They broke camp at first light, continuing their journey through the increasingly bizarre landscape. The rifts were more numerous here, some large enough to create entire pockets of altered reality where physical laws operated differently than in normal space. Aaliyah navigated these anomalies with growing confidence, her natural affinity for the quantum fluctuations allowing her to predict their behavior and identify safe passages. More than once, her harmonic warnings prevented the group from stumbling into dangerous distortions that might have trapped or injured them. By mid-morning, they had covered nearly 2/3 of the distance to the outpost when Soren suddenly signaled for them to take cover. Seconds later, the distinctive hum of core aerial drones became audible, approaching rapidly from the north. "They're using quantum adaptive sensors," Kale whispered, as they huddled beneath a rock formation. "Standard shielding won't hide us." Mara turned to Aaliyah. "Your harmonics. Could you disrupt their scanning patterns the way you interfered with the core's communications in the reactor?" Aaliyah considered this, her luminescence flickering as she processed the challenge. After a moment, she nodded, though her expression conveyed uncertainty about the precise approach. "I think I can help with that," Mara said, quickly unpacking one of the portable instruments they had brought from the laboratory. This was designed to analyze rift frequencies. If we reverse the input-output configuration, it could amplify your harmonics to match the drone's scanning systems. Working together, they hastily modified the device as the drone sounds grew louder. Soren positioned herself at the edge of their shelter, ready to engage if detection became inevitable. Kale assisted with the technical adjustments, their cybernetic enhancements, allowing precise manipulation of the delicate components. "Ready," Mara announced as the first drone appeared over a nearby ridge. "Aaliyah, focus on disrupting their quantum sensors. Don't try to attack the drones directly. Just make us invisible to their scans." Aaliyah closed her eyes, concentrating as she produced a series of precisely calibrated tones. The modified instrument captured these harmonics, amplifying and reshaping them to target the specific frequency range used by the core's scanning technology. The result was a localized quantum distortion, a bubble of altered reality that effectively rendered them non-existent to conventional detection methods. The drones passed overhead, their sensors sweeping the area with methodical precision. For a tense moment, one hovered directly above their position, its scanning beam passing through their location repeatedly. Then, apparently detecting nothing of interest, it moved on, rejoining the search pattern that was gradually expanding southward. Only when the drone sounds had faded completely did they emerge from hiding. Aaliyah looked drained from the effort. Her luminescence dimmed to a faint glow. Soren immediately moved to support her, concern evident in her usually stoic features. "That was remarkable," Mara said, examining the readings from their improvised device. "You didn't just mask our presence. You actually created a localized reality distortion that made this entire area read as empty space." "Quantum harmonics," Cale murmured, equally impressed. "Theoretical papers have suggested such possibilities, but I've never seen a practical demonstration." Aaliyah's response was weak, but determined. A simple melodic sequence that translated roughly as, "Must continue. Not safe yet." They resumed their journey, moving more cautiously, now that they knew the Corps had deployed aerial search patterns. The terrain grew increasingly challenging. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably near larger rifts. Vegetation had evolved bizarre adaptations to quantum instability, and occasionally, entire sections of landscape would phase between different possible states. By early afternoon, they caught sight of their destination, a compact research facility nestled in a relatively stable valley between two major rift formations. The outpost's architecture incorporated quantum stabilization technology, creating a bubble of normal physics within the chaotic environment. A perimeter of sensor arrays surrounded the facility, presumably to study the surrounding anomalies while protecting the inhabitants from their effects. "We need to approach carefully," Cale advised. "The security systems are designed to repel unauthorized visitors. I'll signal my contact." Using a modified communication device, Cale transmitted a coded sequence toward the facility. Long moments passed with no visible response. Then, a small section of the perimeter barrier deactivated, creating an opening just large enough for them to pass through single file. "That's our invitation," Cale said with evident relief. "Let's not keep them waiting." As they approached the barrier, Mara felt a subtle vibration, the quantum stabilization field that separated normal space from the rift-affected environment. Passing through it was like moving through a membrane. A momentary resistance followed by the strange sensation of reality becoming more solid, more definite around them. Inside the perimeter, a lone figure waited, tall and willowy, with features that suggested an aquatic evolutionary origin. 4-fingered hands gestured in a formal greeting pattern. "Cale, you bring trouble to my doorstep," the being said, voice melodious despite the accusatory words. "The Rifters' Council will not be pleased." "Trouble finds us whether we invite it or not." "Thelem," Cale replied. "We need sanctuary, just for a few days." Thalim's large, liquid eyes assessed each of them in turn, lingering longest on Aaliyah. "The violet one. She resonates with the rifts, a harmonic entity." There was wonder in the statement, and perhaps a touch of fear. "Dangerous to have such a being here, where reality is already fragile." "She can control her abilities," Mara interjected. "And we have equipment to monitor and stabilize any interactions with the local quantum field." Thalim considered this, head tilting in a gesture that suggested deep thought. 3 days, they finally decided. "I can conceal your presence for 3 days. After that, you must move on, for all our safety." "Thank you," Mara said sincerely. "We won't forget this kindness." Thalim led them into the facility, a surprisingly comfortable installation despite its isolated location and scientific purpose. The interior spaces were designed with an organic aesthetic that reflected Thalim's aquatic heritage, curved walls and pools of luminescent liquid creating a serene atmosphere, despite the cutting-edge technology integrated throughout. "You will stay in the guest quarters," Thalim informed them, indicating a section separated from the main research areas. Your presence here is known only to me and 2 trusted staff members. The others believe we are conducting a sensitive experiment requiring isolation. What exactly do you study here? Mara asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding their immediate concerns. Quantum linguistics, Thalim replied. The hypothesis that reality at its most fundamental level operates according to principles similar to language, with syntax, grammar, and meaning encoded in the very fabric of existence. Aaliyah's luminescence brightened with interest, and she produced a melodic sequence that seemed to resonate with the quantum stabilization field surrounding the facility. Thalim's eyes widened in response. Fascinating, they murmured. She communicates directly through quantum harmonic manipulation. This confirms several of our theoretical models. Thalim turned to Mara. Your companion is a living embodiment of our research. I understand now why others would pursue her so aggressively. She's not a research subject, Mara said firmly. She's a person whose abilities and autonomy deserve protection. Of course, Thalim agreed quickly. I meant no offense. But you must understand. What she represents is nothing less than a new paradigm for understanding reality itself. In the wrong hands, such knowledge could destabilize more than just local quantum fields. The implication hung heavily in the air as Thalim showed them to their quarters. Once alone, the 4 fugitives gathered to assess their situation and plan their next steps. 3 days isn't much time, Kale observed. But it's enough to analyze the core's tracking data I managed to salvage. If we can identify patterns in their search algorithms, we might find a way to stay ahead of them more effectively. We need more than evasion, Mara countered. We need to understand exactly who's behind this and what they ultimately want. Helix Consortium is involved. You said, but they're a massive organization with dozens of divisions. We need specifics. Soren made a series of emphatic gestures, which Mara had come to recognize as a strategic suggestion. She pointed to the data crystal, then to herself and Kale, followed by a sweeping motion that suggested comprehensive analysis. You're right, Mara interpreted. You and Kale should focus on the tactical data, understanding the core's methods and capabilities. Meanwhile, she turned to Elia. You and I can work with Thalim to explore how your abilities interact with the local rifts. If we can better understand the science behind your harmonic manipulation, we might discover why it's so valuable to Helix. Elia nodded in agreement, her luminescence pulsing with determination. The resonance around her had stabilized within the quantum field of the outpost, becoming more focused, almost musical in its clarity. Their tasks decided, they separated to make the most of their limited sanctuary. Kale and Soren retreated to a workstation to begin analyzing the core data, while Mara approached Thalim about collaborating with their research team. Initially hesitant, Thalim eventually agreed when Mara explained the potential benefits to their quantum linguistics work. Controlled experiments only, they stipulated. Nothing that might destabilize our containment fields. Over the next 2 days, a productive rhythm emerged. Mornings were devoted to experimental sessions, with Aaliyah demonstrating her harmonic abilities, while Thalim's sophisticated instruments recorded and analyzed the quantum effects. Afternoons saw the 4 fugitives reconvening to share discoveries and refine their understanding of both the threat they faced and the extraordinary abilities at the center of the conflict. Kale's analysis revealed disturbing patterns in the core's pursuit. They're not just tracking us, they explained, displaying a holographic map of search patterns. They're establishing a perimeter around Rifter's sanctuary, systematically closing all potential escape routes. Within a week, they'll have complete coverage of every registered departure point. They're not trying to find us, Mara realized. They're waiting for us to try to leave. Soren nodded grimly, her gestures conveying tactical assessment. The core was executing a classic containment strategy, conserving resources while ensuring their quarry had nowhere to run. "What about unregistered departure points?" Mara asked. "This planet is full of researchers and independent operators. There must be unofficial ships coming and going." "There are," Thelem confirmed, joining their discussion. "But using such channels carries significant risks. The rifts make navigation treacherous for vessels without proper shielding. Many who attempt unauthorized departures never reach orbit." The scientific sessions with Aaliyah yielded equally important insights. Working together, Mara and Thelem documented how her harmonic abilities interacted with the quantum field, creating controlled distortions that could theoretically be used for everything from healing to communication to energy manipulation. "Her neural architecture is remarkable," Thelem observed after one particularly successful experiment. "She's not merely producing sound. She's creating quantum-entangled harmonic patterns that can influence reality at its fundamental level." My people called it singing the world, Aaliyah conveyed through her increasingly refined translation matrix. "What you measure with instruments, we feel as intuitive connection." On the evening of their second day at the outpost, a breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. While reviewing the core data for the third time, Kale noticed an encryption pattern they recognized. "This is familiar," they muttered, enhancing a section of code. "I've seen this protocol before, in a project I consulted on 2 years ago." A Helix subsidiary was developing quantum communication technology based on artificial rift generation. "Artificial rifts?" Mara's attention sharpened immediately. "Like the natural ones here on Rifter Sanctuary?" "Similar in effect but more controlled, more focused," Kale explained. The project was called Harmonic Gate, attempting to create stable quantum tunnels for instantaneous communication and eventually transport. But they could never solve the stability problem. The artificial rifts would collapse almost immediately, making them useless for practical applications. Mara turned to Elia, understanding dawning. But if they had someone who could naturally manipulate quantum harmonics, someone who could stabilize the rifts through innate ability, rather than technology, they would have solved the critical limitation, Kale finished. With Aaliyah's abilities harnessed as a component in their system, Helix could establish instantaneous communication and transport capabilities across any distance. The military and economic advantages would be incalculable, Thelem added, their voice hushed with the implications. The faction controlling such technology would dominate interstellar commerce and communication. Soren's expression darkened, her protective instincts visibly intensifying. Her gestures became sharp, urgent. Aaliyah would become a permanent prisoner, her abilities exploited continuously to maintain the quantum tunnels. Not just Aaliyah, Mara realized with growing horror. That's why they were hunting others with similar abilities from her world. They need multiple harmonic manipulators to create a network of stable gates. Aaliyah's luminescence dimmed with distress, her musical communication becoming discordant with grief and anger. The translation rendered her thoughts with stark clarity. My people, harvested like components, silenced and enslaved. The gravity of their situation settled over the group like a physical weight. This wasn't simply about capturing escaped merchandise or recovering valuable property. It was about establishing dominance over the next phase of interstellar civilization, with Aaliyah and others like her reduced to living tools in service to corporate ambition. We need to expose this, Mara decided, her voice hardening with resolve. Not just escape from it. The wider interstellar community needs to know what Helix is attempting. Exposure won't be enough, Kale countered. Corporations like Helix operate with effective immunity in frontier regions. Even if their activities became public knowledge, they would simply shift operations deeper underground while continuing the project. Then we need to do more than expose them, Mara said. We need to dismantle their entire operation, find where they're holding other harmonic manipulators and free them. Soren's expression showed rare approval, her gestured response immediate and emphatic. Yes. Rescue mission? Liberation. That's ambitious, Kale said carefully. We're 4 people against a corporate giant with private military capabilities. 5, corrected Thelem unexpectedly. My research has always been intended to benefit all sentient beings, not to enable dominance by any faction. If Helix succeeds in weaponizing quantum harmonics, my life's work becomes a tool of oppression. I cannot allow that. Their declaration surprised the others. Thelem had seemed cautious, even conservative in their willingness to become involved. This sudden commitment suggested deeper principles than they had previously revealed. Thank you, Mara said sincerely. But Kale is right. We need more than just conviction. We need intelligence, resources, allies. The data crystal. Elia communicated through musical tones that the translator interpreted with increasing accuracy. Deeper patterns, hidden networks, access points. Kale looked skeptical, but returned to the workstation, applying more sophisticated analysis algorithms to the stolen data. Hours passed as they worked, the others contributing insights or assistance as needed. Deep into the night, when exhaustion had begun to dull even Soren's vigilant attention, Kale suddenly straightened. There, they said, highlighting a section of code that had previously appeared meaningless. It was hidden under multiple encryption layers. But Aaliyah was right. There's a complete operational framework here. Research facilities, transport protocols, command structure, everything. The holographic display expanded to show a network of Helix operations spanning multiple star systems. At the center was a facility designated Harmonic Prime, a research station orbiting a neutron star in a rarely traversed sector. That's their main laboratory, Kale interpreted. Where they're developing the harmonic gate technology. Soren studied the display intently before making a series of precise gestures toward a secondary facility labeled Resonant Holdings. She's right, Mara agreed. That's likely where they're keeping the captured harmonic manipulators. The designation suggests containment rather than research. Elia moved closer to the display, her luminescence fluctuating as she examined the facility. Her musical response was complex, layered with emotions that the translator struggled to fully capture. My people, I feel them. Distant echoes, suffering but alive. You can sense them? Mara asked, amazed. From this distance? Not clearly, not precisely, but yes. Elia's response came as a haunting melody that needed no translation to convey its longing and determination. Connection transcends physical space. All harmonic entities share resonance patterns. This revelation opened new possibilities. If Aaliyah could sense her people, perhaps she could also communicate with them, coordinate from within, creating allies behind enemy lines when the time came to act. Their planning continued through the night and into the 3rd day of their sanctuary at the outpost. Thelem provided valuable insights into quantum physics that helped them understand the theoretical foundations of the Harmonic Gate project, while Kale's technical expertise identified vulnerabilities in Helix's security systems. Soren contributed tactical assessments, her military training evident in the precision of her strategic suggestions. Throughout it all, Mara found herself increasingly drawn to Elia, not just as a scientific marvel or someone in need of protection, but as a being of extraordinary depth and beauty. The spiritual archaeologist in her recognized something profound in Elia's approach to reality, a harmonious integration of science and spirituality that transcended conventional understanding. As their final day at the outpost drew to a close, Thelem approached with news that complicated their emerging plan. Core vessels have established a blockade in orbit, they reported grimly. All official departures have been suspended pending a security inspection of the colony. They're no longer waiting for us to try to leave. They're coming to find us. How long do we have? Mara asked. The Council is resisting their authority to conduct groundside operations, But they won't be able to prevent it indefinitely. 24 hours at most before core teams begin systematic searches. The urgency of their situation demanded immediate decisions. After brief but intense discussion, a plan emerged, audacious and risky, but with potential for success. Resonant Holdings is our primary target, Mara summarized as they finalized details. If we can free the other harmonic manipulators, we not only deprive Helix of essential components for their project, but also gain powerful allies with intimate knowledge of their operations. The facility orbits Talus III, Kale noted, highlighting its position in the holographic display. Minimal defenses according to these schematics. They rely on secrecy rather than firepower. How do we get there? Thalem asked the obvious question. With the blockade in place. No vessel can leave Rifter's sanctuary without core inspection. We don't use a vessel, Mara said, her gaze turning to Elia. We use a rift. The proposal was as brilliant as it was dangerous. Rifter's sanctuary was famous for its natural quantum anomalies, rifts that distorted space-time in unpredictable ways. What few outside the scientific community knew was that certain rifts occasionally created spontaneous connections to distant locations, quantum tunnels through which matter could theoretically pass. Most natural tunneling rifts are unstable, Thalem cautioned. Transit success rates in experimental cases are below 20%, and those were with small inanimate objects, not living beings. But with Alia's abilities to stabilize the quantum harmonics, Mara countered, we could potentially create a controlled passage, especially if we target a location with similar quantum characteristics to enhance resonance. Talus III has no natural rifts, Kale pointed out. No, but Helix is generating artificial ones as part of their research, Mara replied. If we time our attempt to coincide with one of their test activations, Elia could theoretically connect our natural rift to their artificial one, creating a bridge between the 2 points. The plan required precise coordination and timing. Using the stolen data, they identified the test schedule for Helix's artificial rift generation. They would have a narrow window, less than 2 minutes, during which Elia would need to establish and maintain a quantum harmonic bridge between a natural rift on Rifter's sanctuary and the artificial one at Resonant Holdings. The greatest risk is destabilization during transit, Thalem explained, as they prepared the necessary equipment. If the harmonic bridge collapses while you're crossing, the consequences would be unpredictable. You mean fatal, Kale said bluntly. Not necessarily. Quantum dispersal might result in recorporealization at an unintended location, or temporal displacement, or phase shifting into a parallel probability state. Thalem's scientific detachment did little to make these alternatives sound more appealing. As night fell on their final day at the outpost, they made their way to a location Thalem had identified as optimal, a natural rift of unusual stability located in a crystalline grotto several kilometers from the facility. The Corps had begun landside operations, but their search patterns indicated they were still focusing on the main settlement and spaceport. The grotto was breathtaking, a cathedral-like space where crystal formations amplified and reflected light in hypnotic patterns. At its center, a rift hung suspended like a tear in reality, shimmering with iridescent energy that cast prismatic reflections across the crystalline walls. Perfect acoustics, Thalem observed, setting up monitoring equipment. The crystal structures will naturally amplify harmonic resonances, giving Alia's abilities maximum effect. While the others prepared the technical aspects of their attempt, Mara took a moment with Alia, sensing her anxiety despite her determined exterior. Are you certain you can do this? Mara asked gently. It's asking an extraordinary amount, even of someone with your abilities. Alia's response came not as translated words, but as a direct harmonic that Mara found she could now understand without technological assistance, a testament to how their connection had deepened over their time together. The message conveyed confidence tempered with realistic assessment. Difficult but possible, especially with support. "We'll all be supporting you," Mara assured her, gesturing to where Soren was methodically checking equipment, her protective attention never wavering from Aaliyah, despite the technical tasks occupying her hands. "Especially Soren. Her belief in you is absolute." Aaliyah's luminescence brightened with affection as she gazed at her partner. Their bond was something Mara had come to admire deeply, a connection forged in adversity and sustained by mutual respect and love that transcended their different natures and origins. "Approaching optimal window," Thalim announced, checking the chronometer against the Helix test schedule they had extracted from the data crystal. "Artificial rift generation at Resonant Holdings will commence in approximately 10 minutes. Final preparations accelerated." Kale distributed specially modified personal shields, devices originally designed to protect against radiation that they had adapted to help maintain physical coherence during quantum transit. Soren performed last-minute weapons checks on the limited armaments they had managed to acquire. Mara and Thalim calibrated the monitoring equipment that would help Elia visualize the quantum harmonics she needed to manipulate. 2 minutes to artificial rift activation," Thalim reported, tension evident even in their usually calm voice. Elia moved to the center of the grotto, positioning herself directly before the natural rift. Its shimmering energy responded to her presence, fluctuations synchronizing with her bioluminescent pulses, as though recognizing a kindred phenomenon. "Beginning harmonic engagement," Mara narrated for the others, as Aaliyah closed her eyes and began to produce a complex series of tones. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The rift's iridescent energy intensified, patterns within it shifting from chaotic fluctuations to organized structures that mirrored Aaliyah's sonic emissions. The crystalline walls of the grotto amplified and reflected her harmonics, creating a three-dimensional acoustic field that seemed to bend reality itself. "Artificial rift generation detected at target location," Kale announced, monitoring the quantum frequency bands they had identified from the Helix data. "Initiating in 3, 2, 1. At the precise moment of activation, Aaliyah's harmonics shifted to a higher register, a sound so pure and perfect it seemed to bypass the ears entirely and resonate directly within the mind. The natural rift before them expanded, its shimmering surface stabilizing into a coherent oval of luminous energy. Within its depths, a distorted image began to form, a metallic chamber filled with technical equipment, recognizable as the artificial rift laboratory from the Helix schematics. "Connection established!" Thalim exclaimed, their scientific detachment momentarily overwhelmed by wonder. "Quantum bridge is stabilizing. Harmonic resonance at 93% synchronization." Soren immediately moved to Elia's side, ready to support her as the visible strain of maintaining the bridge began to take its toll. The green-skinned warrior's expression conveyed both fierce pride and concern as she witnessed her partner's extraordinary feat. "We need to move quickly," Mara urged, gathering the essential equipment they would take with them. "Elia can't maintain this indefinitely." Kale went first, activating their personal shield before stepping decisively into the luminous oval. Their form seemed to elongate momentarily before vanishing entirely. Seconds later, they appeared as a distant figure in the laboratory, visible through the rift, turning to signal that the transit had been successful. Thalim would remain behind, monitoring the quantum bridge from this end and preparing to close it once the others had crossed. They clasped Mara's arm in the formal farewell gesture of their people. "Fortune aligns with the courageous," they said solemnly. "May your harmonics remain true." Mara went next, the sensation of crossing unlike anything she had experienced before, a momentary suspension of existence followed by reconstitution, as though her entire being had been translated into pure information and then reassembled according to a template of memory and identity. She emerged in the Helix laboratory disoriented, but intact, quickly moving aside to make way for those following. Soren guided Elia toward the rift, supporting her, as the effort of maintaining the quantum bridge clearly taxed her strength. Just before they reached the threshold, a distant alarm echoed through the grotto. Core teams had detected the unusual energy patterns and were converging on their location. "Go!" Thalim urged them, already moving to activate countermeasures that would delay pursuit. "I'll hold them as long as possible." Soren and Elia crossed together, the warrior refusing to release her protective hold, even during quantum transit. As they emerged in the laboratory, Elia collapsed, the strain of creating and maintaining the bridge finally overwhelming her reserves. The rift behind them fluctuated wildly, before collapsing with a soundless implosion, cutting off any pursuit, but also any retreat. They had arrived at Resonant Holdings, the facility where Elia's people were imprisoned. But they had arrived as intruders in the heart of enemy territory, with no way back and only their wits, abilities, and determination to carry them forward. The laboratory where they found themselves was clearly designed for quantum experimentation. Arrays of sophisticated equipment surrounded a central platform where the artificial rift had been generated. Alarm indicators flashed silently on several consoles, but no personnel were present, a stroke of fortune suggesting this particular test had been automated rather than directly supervised. "We need to move quickly," Kale advised, already accessing a terminal to determine their precise location within the facility. "The system will have registered quantum anomalies during our arrival. Security response estimated in less than 5 minutes." Soren cradled the exhausted Elia, her expression conveying urgent concern. The violet woman's luminescence had dimmed dramatically, her normally vibrant skin now pale and translucent. "She needs time to recover," Mara assessed, retrieving a portable medical scanner from their equipment. The effort of maintaining that bridge drained her severely. "Time is the one thing we don't have," Kale reminded them, still working at the terminal. "According to the facility schematic, the containment area is 2 levels below us. Minimal security presence overall, 8 guards on rotation, mostly automated systems." Soren made a quick decision, lifting Elia carefully and signaling her intent to proceed, despite her partner's weakened state. Her expression was resolute. They had come too far to hesitate now. Moving with practiced stealth, they exited the laboratory and navigated through maintenance corridors to avoid the main thoroughfares, where they might encounter personnel. Kale's expertise with security systems proved invaluable, allowing them to temporarily loop surveillance feeds and bypass electronic locks without triggering alerts. As they descended toward the containment level, Elia began to revive slightly, her luminescence strengthening, though still far from its normal brilliance. She communicated through weak but determined musical phrases that the translator rendered as, "Closer, feel them stronger, 8, no, 9 others, alive but diminished." 9 survivors, Mara whispered, hope and dread mingling in her voice. "How many were taken originally? Do you know?" Elia's response was sorrowful. 23 from my community alone, others from distant settlements. Dozens. The implications were grim. Either the missing had perished or been transferred to other facilities. Perhaps the main research station at Harmonic Prime. Either way, those remaining at Resonant Holdings were likely the only ones they could hope to save in this operation. They reached the containment level without encountering resistance. The facility was operating with minimal staff, relying on automated systems for routine security. Through observation ports in the corridor wall, they could see into a large, circular chamber where 9 transparent cells were arranged in a spoke pattern. Each cell contained a being similar to Elia, varying in coloration, but all possessing the distinctive luminescent quality that marked them as harmonic manipulators. Unlike Elia, these captives wore not just collars, but complete neural harnesses that covered much of their bodies. Technology clearly designed to suppress their abilities, while simultaneously channeling them into the facility's systems. Conduits ran from each harness to a central hub where their combined quantum manipulations were presumably focused for the artificial rift experiments. "Barbaric!" Mara breathed, anger rising at the sight of such exploitation. "They're not even being treated as sentient beings, just as biological components in a machine." Soren's expression hardened, her free hand moving to the weapon at her side. The tactical assessment was clear. Direct confrontation would be necessary to free the prisoners. "The central control station is there." Kale indicated a shielded booth overlooking the containment chamber. "All harness systems are managed from that position. One operator present." "I'll handle the operator," Mara decided. "Kale, you'll need to override the harness controls once we have access. Soren, stay with Aaliyah but be ready to defend if security responds." Their plan set, they moved with coordinated precision. Mara approached the control booth from a blind angle, using a small canister of sedative gas she had prepared specifically for non-lethal neutralization. The operator, a technician focused entirely on monitoring instruments, had no chance to react before the gas took effect. Slumping unconscious at their station, Kale immediately took over the controls, fingers flying across the interface as they deciphered the harness management system. "Complex, but not impenetrable," they assessed. "Give me 3 minutes." While Kale worked, Aaliyah insisted on being brought closer to the transparent barrier separating them from her imprisoned people. Despite her weakened state, she pressed her palms against the material, her luminescence flaring with renewed purpose as she produced a soft, mournful melody. The effect rippled through the containment chamber. One by one, the imprisoned harmonic manipulators raised their heads, their own diminished luminescence strengthening in response to Aaliyah's call. Even through the neural harnesses designed to suppress their abilities, they recognized the resonance of one of their own, a beacon of hope after long captivity. "Connection established," Kale announced triumphantly. "Initiating harness deactivation sequence. Now." Throughout the chamber, indicator lights on the neural harnesses shifted from active red to dormant blue. The captives stirred, many struggling to stand after prolonged physical restriction. Some reached tentatively toward their harnesses, as though unable to believe the possibility of freedom. "We need to get them out of those cells," Mara said, examining the booth's controls. "There must be a release mechanism." "Found it," Kale confirmed, activating a sequence that caused the transparent barriers to retract into the floor. "But it triggered a security protocol. Response team has been alerted." Soren immediately shifted to defensive posture, positioning herself to cover both entrances to the containment area, while Mara and Kale helped the freed captives. Aaliyah, drawing strength from reunion with her people, moved among them, her musical communications clearly providing explanation and reassurance. The freed harmonic manipulators varied in their conditions. Some appeared relatively strong despite their captivity, while others showed signs of severe physical and psychological trauma. All wore the same expression of disbelieving hope as they realized rescue was real rather than another cruel experiment. "We need to move before security arrives," Kale urged, monitoring facility systems through the control booth interface. "There's a maintenance shuttle bay 1 level up. If we can reach it, we might secure transport off the station." Mara translated this plan to Aaliyah, who conveyed it musically to her people. Those strong enough immediately began helping their weaker companions, preparing for the escape attempt. Their coordination was impressive, even without spoken language. They organized efficiently, clearly accustomed to collective action. As they prepared to leave the containment area, a piercing alarm activated throughout the facility. Security doors began to close automatically, threatening to trap them where they stood. "Countermeasures!" Kale shouted, racing back to the control booth. "I need to override before we're sealed in!" But before they could reach the controls, One of the freed captives, a harmonic manipulator with deep blue luminescence, stepped forward, raising their hands toward the descending security doors. They produced a multi-layered harmonic, unlike anything Mara had heard before. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The metal of the doors seemed to lose coherence, particles vibrating at frequencies that prevented solid formation. Molecular destabilization, Mara realized with awe. They're preventing the atomic bonds from maintaining structural integrity. With the security doors neutralized, their path remained open, moving as quickly as the weakest among them could manage. The expanded group made their way toward the shuttle bay. Twice they encountered security personnel, but the combined abilities of the stronger harmonic manipulators, supported by Soren's combat skills, neutralized these threats without casualties on either side. The shuttle bay contained 3 small vessels designed for orbital transfers, more than enough to accommodate their group. Kale immediately set to work, bypassing the launch restrictions, while Mara and Soren organized the freed captives for boarding. "Where will we go?" one of the stronger harmonic manipulators asked. Through Elia's translation, "Helix has influence throughout this sector. Rifter's sanctuary is compromised," Mara acknowledged. "But I know of another location, a former research site where I conducted some of my early xenoharmonic studies. It's off most navigation charts, deliberately obscured to protect the unique quantum phenomena I was investigating." The suggestion met with approval from the group. With Kale's technical expertise, they soon had 2 of the shuttles prepared for departure. Redundancy, in case one encountered problems during their escape. Just as they completed preparations, the bay doors opened to admit a security team, 6 core operatives in full tactical gear. Unlike the facility personnel they had encountered previously, these were trained combatants, armed with weapons designed for maximum effectiveness, with minimal structural damage. "Surrender immediately," the team leader commanded. "Compliance will result in humane treatment. Resistance will be met with authorized force." Soren stepped forward, placing herself between the threat and those she had sworn to protect. Her stance conveyed absolute commitment. She would die before allowing anyone to be recaptured. Behind her, the freed harmonic manipulators gathered in a crescent formation, their luminescence strengthening as they aligned their resonance patterns. Even Elia, still weakened from creating the quantum bridge, joined the formation, her violet glow intensifying as she connected with her people's combined harmonic. "Last warning," the core leader stated flatly, weapon raised. "Stand down or—" Before he could complete the threat, the harmonic manipulators released their combined power, not as a weapon, but as a reality distortion that bent perception itself. The core operatives froze, their expressions shifting from determination to confusion as their sensory inputs became unreliable. Some lowered their weapons, disoriented by the harmonic assault on their perception, while others fired wildly at targets that existed only in their manipulated senses. "Now!" Mara shouted, ushering everyone toward the shuttles. "While they're disoriented!" They boarded quickly, Kale piloting one vessel, while a blue luminescent manipulator, with apparent technical knowledge, took control of the second. As the bay doors began to close, manual override activated by someone outside the affected area, both shuttles lifted off, accelerating through the narrowing gap into the void beyond. "Tracking systems indicate pursuit vessels launching," Kale reported tensely as they cleared the facility's immediate space. "Estimated intercept in 17 minutes. "We need to reach the jump point before they catch us," Mara said, studying the navigational display. "Once we're in hyperspace, we can disappear along any of a dozen different routes." The harmonic manipulators, still maintaining their resonance formation, despite the separation between shuttles, produced a coordinated harmonic that seemed to extend beyond the vessel's hulls. Sensor readings began to fluctuate wildly, becoming increasingly unreliable. "They're disrupting the pursuit vessel's tracking systems," Kale realized. creating quantum-level interference that makes us virtually invisible to conventional sensors. This advantage allowed them to reach the jump point unmolested, slipping into hyperspace just as the pursuit vessels began to close the distance. Freedom, tentative but real, had been achieved. In the relative safety of hyperspace transit, Mara finally had opportunity to learn more about the freed captives. Through Elia's translation, they shared their experiences, how they had been captured in coordinated raids across their homeworld, separated from family and community, subjected to experiments designed to quantify and exploit their natural abilities. Most distressing were their accounts of those who had not survived. Harmonic manipulators whose abilities had been pushed beyond sustainable limits in Helix's determination to perfect their artificial rift technology. The survivors carried not just their own trauma, but the resonant echoes of those lost, a harmonically preserved memory that kept their fallen kin alive in a way unique to their species' perception of reality. "What will you do now?" one of them asked Mara as their journey progressed. "Helix will not abandon their project simply because we escaped. They will seek others with our abilities. They will continue." "I know," Mara acknowledged grimly. "That's why our work isn't finished. This rescue was just the beginning. We need to expose what Helix is doing, gather allies who can help dismantle their operation completely." The harmonics manipulator considered this, their luminescence pulsing thoughtfully. "Our people have always used our abilities for creation, for healing, for communion with the fundamental rhythms of existence. To see these gifts perverted for domination..." They paused, their musical communication shifting to a more resolute pattern. "We will help you, not for vengeance, but to prevent others from suffering as we have." 2 days later, they arrived at Mara's hidden research outpost, a small installation built into an asteroid in a system so unremarkable it had never warranted formal colonization. The facility had been designed for xenoharmonic research, with specialized equipment that would allow the freed manipulators to recover and potentially develop their abilities in new directions. As they established themselves in this temporary sanctuary, Mara found a moment alone with Elia and Soren on an observation platform overlooking the asteroid's barren but strangely beautiful landscape. The three had come through extraordinary challenges together, forming a bond that transcended their different origins and natures. "What you did, creating that quantum bridge, leading us to your people, it was remarkable," Mara told Elia, genuine admiration in her voice. Few beings in the galaxy could have accomplished something so extraordinary. Elia's response came as a gentle harmonic that Mara now understood without need for translation. Not alone. Never alone. She reached out, one hand clasping Soren's, the other extended toward Mara. Connection gives strength beyond individual capacity. Mara took the offered hand, feeling the subtle resonance that passed between them. Not just physical contact, but a deeper harmony that seemed to align their very being at some fundamental level. Soren watched this connection with an expression that had evolved from suspicious vigilance to something approaching acceptance, perhaps even affection. "We have a long road ahead," Mara acknowledged. "Exposing Helix, preventing them from simply rebuilding their project elsewhere, finding a permanent sanctuary for your people. None of it will be easy." "The path that matters rarely is," came Elia's musical response, her luminescence brightening with determination. "But we walk it together, in harmony, each contributing our unique resonance to a greater whole." As they stood together, gazing out at the star-filled expanse beyond the viewport, Mara felt something she had not experienced since before the Cygnus incident. A sense of purpose that aligned perfectly with her deepest values. A connection to others that transcended mere alliance or friendship. The spiritual archaeologist had spent years searching for meaning in the echoes of ancient civilizations. Now she found it in living harmonies, in the courage of a warrior who had chosen love over duty, in the resilience of a sound artist who had maintained her essence through unimaginable hardship, and in her own rediscovered capacity for growth and connection. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them, as they had faced all others, together. Their individual strengths amplified through unity, creating a harmony powerful enough to change reality itself. In the quiet observation room, as Aaliyah's gentle resonance enveloped them, Mara understood that she had found not just allies in a righteous cause, but a new definition of family, beings whose differences created not division, but a richer, more beautiful harmony than any could achieve alone. The future remained uncertain, fraught with dangers they had yet to face. But in this moment, surrounded by the resonant connection they had forged through trial and transformation, one truth became crystalline in its clarity. No force in the universe could withstand the power of beings who had found their true harmony together. The end was merely a beginning, a first movement in a symphony that would continue to unfold across the stars, changing not just their own lives, but potentially the course of interstellar civilization itself. And whatever notes that symphony might contain, discord and harmony, struggle and triumph, they would face it as they now stood, together, resonant, and unafraid.